Hello, hello, and welcome to Saturday Soundbites. This is the podcast where we talk about all things visibility strategy. And I'm your host, Veronica. So far, I have the opportunity and pleasure of bringing on some amazing guests who can talk to you about public relations, marketing, advertising, communication strategy, all the things you need to know to grow your visibility strategy and just be a phenomenal communicator. And I'm very excited about today's episode. But before we get started, I want to make sure that if you are listening on the podcast, you hit subscribe. We don't want you to miss any episodes of Saturday Soundbites. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, drop us some comments, and my guest and I will make sure that we connect with you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am going to bring on the amazing Arianna Vazquez-Hernandez. Thank you for joining us, Arianna. I'm so excited about today's talk.
Thank you so much, Veronica. So am I. I am a fan. I'm a follower. So really excited to be here and enjoying this conversation.
Oh, that's so fantastic. So, first of all, let people know that you've been in communications a while, and we're going to ask you about how you got started. But I want to make sure we also acknowledge your credentials. You're an APR, which is accredited in public relations, which is another reason why I'm very excited about you being on the show. And then you have your CPC certification. So, tell us what that is, and then tell us a little bit how you got started in communications.
Sure. So I am hitting, I guess, close to 20 years in the business. Still a little shy, a couple of years shy, but I feel like I've already landed the 20 years. If I go back to my newspaper days in
Ye-
college, and
Yes.
I was a reporter in another life, like I like to say, and that's where I started really covering sports in college, and I really fell in love with the art of storytelling. At the end of the day, that's what communications is, right? You're telling a story. You're just using a different format, a different writing style, but it's still telling a story. So that's what happened. And so I was able to do that. I was the editor for the paper at my college, everything that goes with that. And then started working for a Spanish newspaper that was actually in different areas of Texas called Rumbo. And it was like this really great experience. A lot of the editors and the creators were Pulitzer Prize winners and, just big time shots in a lot of newspapers around the world. So I
Mhm.
really felt like I got, the best experience by working there because I learned truly from the best.
Mhm.
And so from there, I jumped into PR. I had done internships with the VA in my college days, and it was one of those things where life just led me to PR, and I felt comfortable enough with the experience I had received through the internship, and really, like any job, you kind of grow with it, right?
Mhm.
Even if you don't have all the bells and whistles yet, you learn a lot on the job, and that's what I did. So I started a small district, which was actually my alma mater, and was there for a little bit when I moved to a larger district here in the Rio Grande Valley. And I've been doing school PR for about almost 18 years now, and the credentials were always something that I looked forward to. When I started, back in one of the districts back in 2005, no, 2006. I met wonderful individuals through NSPR, National
Mhm.
School Public Relations Association, and they all had these little three letters after their name, right? APR. And I'm like, what is that? I kept on asking people, what is that?
Mhm.
Oh, well, it's an accreditation. It's kind of like that stamp of approval that you know what you're doing, right? And I was like, well, that's neat. How can I learn more about it? So I remember going to a boot camp, and they're like, no, you need to have 5 years at least in the profession in order to attempt it. So I was like, okay, I was very green, but I always had it there. Like, okay, that's something I want to do. I want to be like them. And
Mhm.
and so 5 years passed, 6 years, 7 years,
Yeah.
and they just kind of kept on going. And I was like, I really need to go and approach this APR. And I finally did. We had a great little team here in the valley that we'd meet up and study together. And at that time, it had been a long time since somebody from TSPR had gotten an APR when I received it. And so that was really cool when I got it. And I was pinned by my peers, and it was kind of like one of those, I always like to compare it to if you're an accountant,
Right.
and you're a certified accountant. That's what it is, except
Mhm.
we don't get that big of a credit for it sometimes because it's not well known in
Mhm.
other areas outside of communications. But really, if you go anywhere in the world, if you go anywhere around the nation, APR is really seen as one of the highest credentials you can have.
Mhm.
And so really excited when I got that and joined that elite group within my peers. And then CPC is something that came about through a partnership with our Texas School Public Relations Association and Texas Christian University. And that was another one. I kept on seeing these amazing professors at our conferences. I'm like, what is that? And some of my peers had gone through it. And what it was a 2-year preparation to get this certificate through TCU.
Mhm.
You got to spend time at TCU, but what was really cool about it, which I always tell my friends, like, you have to go through it if you have the opportunity, is that it wasn't just about school PR. It was
Mhm.
actually about the private sector, about city and county government. It
Right.
was really you got to experience a different field through CPC. You make lifelong friends. You go back to dorms, except TCU dorms are really nice apartments.
Yeah.
But you go back to that lifestyle for a couple of weeks during the summer, and it really just immerses you into that culture
Mhm.
of lifelong learning.
Right.
I love to say, I'm a geek at heart, but I'm truly a geek. I love to learn. I keep on wanting to learn the new thing, the new strategy, the new way of doing things, and just being in a program with like-minded people just
Mhm.
really brings the best out of you.
Yeah.
And so that was also an amazing experience, and so there I got to add 3 more letters to the end of my
I
name.
love it. I love it. I love it. And it's so important, you talk about lifelong learning, and regardless of what business you're in, you could be a realtor, you could even be running your own law firm, because we have a lot of people who are listening who are running their own businesses. No matter the space, the strategy and the learning is really the key to your growth. And so, I love that you talked about strategy because, when you and I originally talked about you coming on the show, one of the things that I wanted our listeners to learn about from you was how you have really, in all the jobs you've had, been able to connect with your audience. And that's really important because you can know the demographics, you can know where they live, you can know how they vote, you can know everything about them. But if you're not meeting them where they're at and you know how to strategically connect to them, you're going to miss them. So what are some of the things that you've learned through all those credentials and even being a reporter? I mean, that's really the foundation of your storytelling career. How did you learn to really start connecting with people?
Really, it's all about putting yourself in, and it's a cliche, right? But putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. I mean, really,
Mhm.
that's what it's all about. And I feel sometimes once you get into the weed of the business, you kind of start losing that sense of connection, right?
Mhm.
And you start really focusing on um, the right approach that somebody else tells you to do.
Mhm.
And I love field being out in the field and really field testing a lot of what I do. And sometimes it's not a formal focus group, it's not a formal survey, it's just going to events, going to the community, talking to people at HEB, at any location where you see them, and asking them key questions.
Mhm.
That's where I love to measure the real outcome of the strategies and what we do. um, the pandemic obviously caused, threw a big wrench on a lot of what the day to day or the normal type of communication was like. Especially, at a school district with our parents. And, you could still, in a way, even though we had all this tech, you can still send a note home if you needed to. You still,
Mhm.
you could do a lot of things like that just made it feel homey. And like, oh, there's that relationship. A teacher could easily send something home, and I'd open my son or my daughter's backpack and see that connection already. With the pandemic, we all became,
Yeah.
techies. We were all in front of a computer. That emotional connection was kind of, not there. And so one of my biggest things is like, okay, how can we go back and not lose that connection that took years to build,
Years.
that
Yeah.
trust that took years to build? And so I, definitely relied on social media, right? Relied on podcast style like this. A lot of people thought I was a little crazy going live on Facebook with very hard to explain topics.
Hmm.
And I said, no, this is the new forum. This is where they're at. This is where they're getting their news. This is where they're gonna be, and they're gonna see that pop up, and they're gonna join our conversation. And sure enough, we started, small with, very small topics, and then it was an expectation. They wanted to hear from us every week. They wanted to hear from different experts in different topics such as health, counseling, SEL, right? Everything that came with it. And so I started getting calls from colleagues throughout other districts and other businesses, and they're like, how are you doing it? Do you have somebody moderate the questions? Do you, I'm like, no, 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 no. The last thing you want to do is censor anything.
Hmm.
And if there's a question or something on the chat that's, maybe not something you really wanted to approach, that's really the one I would tackle first.
Yeah.
It was like, it was the first one I would tackle, even though it was the hardest question. And so that's one of the things that I've always approached, is doing the right thing for the people you serve.
Hmm.
A lot of people see PR as, oh, you're spinning it. No, there's no such thing as that. You,
Right.
you, you just say it in a way that people will understand. You
Hmm.
convey the message in a way they'll understand, but there's no sugarcoating. There's no covering. There's no, and so, but a lot of people just have that misconception of our
Hmm.
work. It's just finding the way to tell the story, to tell the news, or to tell what's happening in an easy way for any viewer or a particular audience that you're wanting to target can understand.
Hmm.
And so that, it's really hard. I think a lot of people see statements or posts that are online, and they're like, oh, they forgot to mention this and this. Everything has a strategy, right?
Right.
Everything has a
Right.
reason of why it exists. And when I do workshops, or I talk to, some of our peers that are new to the industry, I always tell them, like, there's no cookie cutter. There is no cookie cutter. Anything you have out there, you have to do your research. You have to make sure that it is relevant to what it's actually happening, what's happening in the world around you. Even if
Right.
your business is completely different from education, and you're promoting a particular product, you have to be aware of what's happening in the world around you, because it could really just, backlash. And it could have been a great campaign. It could have been a great, but maybe not for that particular time. So knowing
Yeah.
the audience, knowing the time of day, knowing the time of um, the environment, or the atmosphere going around you, is very important to be
Hmm.
successful, and for those
Yeah.
strategies to really stick.
Yeah, and I liked how you talked about what it was like before the pandemic, because that's exactly right. We got used to communicating in a way that people liked and were used to. I don't know if they liked it, but they were used to it. So, like, I love the example of the backpack. You knew if the teacher put a note in the backpack, that's how she was going to communicate. And then after the pandemic, everyone has had to learn how to redo every business, including takeout. A prime example, we went and got takeout the other night, and I was like, "Well, they're gonna do curbside, right? Because I'm used to curbside now. I like curbside. I don't wanna actually get out of my car and go in."
Yep, yep, the convenience.
The convenience, and
Yeah.
so I love the idea about you going Facebook Live in an industry that doesn't normally do that. You see entrepreneurs, you see people online, you see people do it, but generally not in the government space or even the nonprofit space. So the fact that you were doing that was really revolutionary. And I want to ask you how you decided to address those tough questions, because especially in a space where people are wanting to talk about safety and security and really important things like mental health. How did you decide, and how were you prepared to deal with those topics that were really hot buttons for people that traditionally people in the school PR space would not address in a live forum? They would push it off and maybe write something in response, but not talk about it live one on one.
We learned a lot for sure. Um, going back to, the lifelong learner aspect, it was a bold approach. And I'm going to be honest, sometimes some topics worked, some didn't really quite work,
Uh,
but it gave us a learning experience as to what our audience, what they're thinking, what they want, what they expect from
mm,
us as public officials, as a governmental agency, as their child's school,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so we definitely got the experts in the field. So that's one of the things, I had people wanting to join the conversations, and I did have to, have the try to have the best judgment. I had certain people that would always be on during
Mm,
that time, right?
hmm.
So we had our head of health services that would always be on call. She was always going to be there because that question was always going to come up, right?
Hmm.
I had our assistant superintendent for student support that, handles a lot of mental health, works with the counselors, any type of behavioral that needs to be addressed. He was always on call, and I worked with both of them. I would have calls beforehand. We would have conversations on the topics. And if we truly didn't have an answer for some of our parents, we would say that, what, we haven't really found an answer for that yet. Give us some time. We'll get back to you. That will be our next topic,
Hmm.
and it was always about having that servant heart, right? Having
Yeah.
that approach of, we may not know, we don't have all the answers. It was a time of no answers, right? It was the first time
Yeah.
ever that
Yeah.
we didn't have answers. Every day was a different day, and we had different messages, and it was just one of those where we don't know, but we're going to do this together and we're going to figure it out, right?
Hmm.
And we did. And I think people really took took the best out of that, because they relied, we built those relationships where they knew they could trust what we were saying and what we were getting out there, because
Hmm.
even if we didn't have the answer that 1 minute, we were going to give it to them eventually. and
Yeah.
and that's what it's all about, right? It's about building those relationships, building that trust. You don't want to break that trust. The minute you do, it's like, I mean, it's like an example I always bring up. If you go to a restaurant that you love, but for whatever reason, that one day you had a bad experience, whether it was the server, or maybe the person, bringing you the food, whatever it was just a bad experience. You tend to stop going, even though it's one of your favorites,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's just, you disconnected, like there was something that just cut that little fine line you had of a relationship, and you stop going. And a lot of times you don't realize it until later, like, how come we stopped going to that place,
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
would go to every week? And then you think back and you're like, oh, it was that one bad experience I had. So you can have a multitude of amazing experiences, but we're human, right? And
Yeah.
that one experience, we're going to take it to heart, and maybe subconsciously we're not going to realize it, but it's going to be there, and you're going to stop being that customer for that
Hmm.
business or for that. And so that was my approach. I'm like, you know what, we're going to be upfront, we're going to be clear, and then I would never leave them alone. There's a lot of times where folks in our profession will kind of take that back seat, right? And we do
Hmm.
many times, because our job is not to take the front seat. But when it's time of crisis, we have to. We're
Hmm.
the ones prepared to take that front seat, and we're the ones prepared to prepare those that do need to come up eventually and speak about the
Hmm.
topic. But one of the things I've seen is that a lot of times, when it's a crisis, we tend to put that person up there first,
Right.
and they're not ready. They're
Yeah.
not ready for those questions. They're not ready to answer, and to mitigate some of what may be happening in those conversations.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's so true. And it is all about relationships. And, going back to what we originally talked about, meeting people where they're at, if we break that trust, it doesn't matter how good we are at getting to them. They're not going to respond to us if we've broken their trust and haven't provided them the service or didn't follow through with the things that we said. And I think that's true for anyone in any type of customer service or customer experience, especially with technology and how easy it is to have competition. We always joke about, well, if we don't like this phone service, we'll go to Verizon, or we'll go to T-Mobile, or we'll go to AT&T. I mean, there are options out there. And so trust and relationship building is where you build that rapport. And whether it's a government job or a purchase, a job where people are actually exchanging commerce, it doesn't matter. It's all about relationships and trust. And so I love that you said that, because too often we're not willing to do what you said, which is take risks, be vulnerable, and be honest. Sometimes we don't have the answers, and it's okay to say we don't have the answers.
Yes, for sure. We grow, going through the business, you always hear the never say no comment, right? Whenever you're talking to media or any official, never say that. And it's true. You don't want to say that, because it's really cutting off, again, that relationship and that trust. But being blunt and saying, I don't have the answer for you right now, but let me go back and make sure I get it. I get it for you, because I'm really not sure about this. That's okay,
Yeah.
and people will remember that. And I always go back to an experience I had at one of my districts where they had it was a very hard time for the district, lack of trust, morale was low. And there was a parent that called, and I happened to pick up. I was not the right department for him. He needed other type of help. But I was like, how can I help you, sir? I'll try to help you. And he gave me, what he needed. I'm like, you know what? I don't have the answer for you. I'm new here, but let me find out for you if I could get your name, your number, and I'll call you right back. He started laughing, literally just burst out laughing. And he's like, you're never going to call me back. That's what they always say. You're never going to call me back. And I'm like, sir, I promise you, I will call you back. I just don't have the answer for you. And so sure enough, we hang up. He, of course, was probably like, yeah, right. This is what happens all the time. I get the answer and I call him back like 30 minutes later, because it was a very hard topic and it took me a while. And I didn't know people yet. So I was like, okay, who do I call for this?
Yeah.
And so then I call him back and he's like, oh my God. Like, he was just like, where he had said all kinds of things to me, he wasn't saying too much now. And I'm like, yes, sir, I got the answer you needed. I'm sorry it took so long. No, you actually called me back. And it didn't take much for me to do it.
Right.
It took only 30 minutes of my day trying to figure it out, and then calling him back. But he was so shocked that happened. That's not what Nobody should be shocked from any
Right.
business, right?
Right.
Everybody should be getting those phone calls back. They should be getting the answers they need in whatever role you play. You should never feel you cannot provide that, right?
Right.
I didn't have it. It wasn't me. I wasn't the right person, but I was going to get that answer for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just, and that was the turning point for a lot of people. And we turned that perception around. We made the reality of, being there for our stakeholders when they needed us. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it took a long time. It took a long time to do that. But it's something, like you said, any industry, you have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to put yourself like, you are the customer, and what would be your expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, you mentioned curbside, convenience is key. That expectation has gone up a notch, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to be there for them. It just yesterday, we went out for dinner. My brother-in-law made the reservation on the app, right? For a table of 9. We get there. He happened to he made it to the wrong, restaurant, and not the one where we were at, but another location, which happens, right? And I've been to restaurants that are like, never, don't worry about it. I'll sit you right now. Because it was so automatic for that staff person, for that team member, right? She's like, well, we don't have you. Like, what's your name? And you're gonna have to wait another 20 minutes. But the approach was, I would have laughed and I'd be like, you know what, that happens all the time. Yes, you probably made it there. It happens all the time. Let me see what I can do. I'm gonna try to cut that time a little bit for you, but let me get your information. The approach, it goes a long way.
Yeah.
You might still have the 20-minute wait, but the approach that you give totally changes the perception and of the business
Yeah.
of, and you're satisfied. It's like, okay, you're willing to wait the same amount of time, but at least it's that approach and that way of responding. It really goes
Hmm.
a long way. So
Yeah.
so they're young. She was at the front. It's probably a location or a restaurant that doesn't really pay too much attention to that because they're big, but those little things do go a long way, and that's what we need to be looking at as communicators, as
Hmm.
individuals, on our end of the table, is how can we support everybody in every position, so that what we're saying is truly conveyed when they come to see
Hmm.
us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because words matter. Words matter. Even if the facts don't change, how you say it. And we know that as writers, as trained writers, but the general public needs to be reminded how you say things really matter, even if the answer isn't different than what it could have been the other way. You just have to be able to know how your audience wants to receive it in a way that's going to leave a positive impact on them for sure.
Yeah. How do they make you feel? Right. And
Hmm.
so that's a,
Yeah.
a big thing that I've been kind of reading about and researching about. And, it's really about how you make that customer feel.
Hmm.
Some, you have to say it in a way that they're going to feel good. It's like, you know what? Okay. Yeah. We messed up, but, joke about it or whatever and say,
Yeah.
I'm going to help you out. Like that happens all the time. And then you kind of like lessen the situation. So definitely, be aware
Yeah.
of the words and how
That's
you're
right.
making them feel.
That's great advice. Be aware of the words. I love it. All right, Ariana, we're going to wrap up this episode. How can people connect with you? Because you're so well spoken, you are so well read, and you're always being a mentor and giving advice to people. How can people connect with you?
Sure. My Twitter handle is, I think you're going to display
Yep,
it.
it'll be in the notes.
It's,
Yep.
it's not my name. So definitely through Twitter. LinkedIn is another, great way to connect. I like to share a lot of the things that I read, that I'm studying, or that I come across. I give a lot of kudos when there's an opportunity to, and definitely I'm only, a message away or a call away. I love to really connect with different industries. Even, I recently finished a master's program with Northwestern, and my network became a little bit wider, and I love it because there, even though I was the only one in school PR in the program, I there was private sector and public sector, and they were just, the what you learn, how you apply it is the
Yeah,
same no
that's right.
matter the business. And so I learned a lot from them, and just really cool business ideas that they were all in, that were completely out of the scope. And so they also learned from our work, in
Yeah.
school PR. They were so surprised that we were ahead of a lot of things. And I'm like, yeah, we're not what you think. We're really ahead. We have amazing individuals that work day in and day out in school and in school PR, that maybe 20 years ago was not a big thing. They were
Mhm.
very sporadic. Now you see us almost everywhere, and with COVID a little bit more. So I'm happy to help out. I'm happy to guide as much as I can, and really really excited to continue that growth of our profession, within Texas, and further than that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so excited. Thank you for generosity and for your time today. I've loved having you on the show.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for the invite, and I look forward to seeing more of these amazing conversations.
You bet. You bet. All right, folks, that wraps up this episode of Saturday Soundbites. Ariana's amazing. You want to connect with her. Talk about a servant's heart. That's what it's all about when you're connecting with your audience, making sure you're communicating with them in the way they want to be communicated with. So make sure you share this episode. If you are listening on the podcast, hit subscribe. We don't want you to miss any episodes. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, drop us some comments and we'll get back to you. And be sure to hashtag replay if you caught the replay. So this is Veronica Sofer. I'm signing off. You can always reach me at veronicavsofer.com. And I'm sending you lots of energy and light and wrapping up this episode.